the laughter reached him before the words did. It floated through the glass doors of the rooftop lounge, light and careless, layered with music and the soft clink of crystal glasses. He had just stepped out to answer a call, phone still in his hand, when her voice rose above the rest, confident, amused, unguarded. The city lights shimmered behind her as she leaned against the railing, surrounded by people who smiled too quickly and listened too closely. "I can dump him anytime," she said, swirling the wine in her glass. "He's just my play toy whenever I'm bored." The words landed with precision, sharp and clean, as if they had been waiting for the right moment to strike. A few of her friends gasped, others laughed nervously. Someone muttered, "You're terrible," but no one stopped her. No one defended him. Not even her. Behind the glass he stood very still. For a brief second, the world narrowed to small details most people would miss. The way her wrist tilted as she laughed, the faint crease at the corner of her mouth when she felt powerful, the hum of the elevator somewhere below. His phone vibrated softly in his palm, the screen lighting up with a voicemail he had recorded minutes earlier. A message meant for her. A simple one. An offering of peace, maybe even affection. He listened to her again, letting the sentence replay in his mind. "Play toy. Whenever I'm bored." His thumb hovered over the screen. For a heartbeat, he considered sending the voicemail anyway, imagined her listening later, distracted, barely paying attention. Then he did something that surprised even himself. He deleted it. The phone went dark. His face remained calm. Inside the lounge, she continued, emboldened by attention. She talked about freedom, about options, about how easy it was to replace men who didn't bring value. Each sentence tightened the invisible thread between them, a thread she assumed only she could cut. She never looked toward the glass doors. She didn't see him standing there, didn't notice the way his reflection merged with the city skyline behind her. If she had, she might have seen the smile, small, quiet, almost gentle, that touched his lips. It wasn't a smile of pain. It wasn't even anger. It was recognition. Years earlier, his mother had once told him that people always reveal their truest selves when they believe they are untouchable. He had not understood then. He understood now. Standing there, hearing the woman he married reduce him to an object, he felt something settle into place, like the final piece of a puzzle sliding home. He slipped the phone into his pocket and pushed open the glass door. The music swallowed him instantly. The laughter continued. She noticed him only when he was already beside her, close enough to hear her breathing change as she realized he might have heard something. Her smile flickered, recalibrated. He said nothing. He simply nodded once, politely, as if nothing of importance had happened at all. That was the moment everything changed, though no one there knew it yet. Not her, not her friends, not even him fully. They couldn't see what had just begun because the most dangerous shifts never announced themselves. They arrive quietly, wearing patience like armor, waiting for the right time to move. Don't forget to hit that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories. Tap the notification bell so you never miss a twist. New tales drop every day. He had learned silence long before he learned love. The memory returned to him that night, uninvited, as he lay beside her in their bed, staring at the ceiling while her breathing settled into sleep. The room was expensive in the way magazines approved of: soft lighting, clean lines, nothing personal enough to reveal weakness. She slept on her side, phone still in her hand, face relaxed and untroubled. Whatever she had said at the party had already evaporated from her mind. But for him, the past had opened its doors. He was 12 the first time he understood what noise could destroy. His father's voice had filled their small living room, loud and righteous, fueled by the certainty that being heard meant being right. Plates shattered. Words cut deeper than the shards on the floor. His mother had stood quietly by the window, hands folded, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. She never screamed back. She never fought him in the way movies suggested strength looked like. Later that night, when the house finally went still, she sat beside her son on the edge of the bed and pressed an ice pack to his bruised arm where his father's hand had gripped too hard. "Why didn't you stop him?" he had asked, young enough to believe volume equaled power. She looked at him for a long time before answering. "Because men like that don't lose when you shout," she said softly. "They lose when they have no one left to shout at." That sentence stayed with him even after she didn't. She died when he was 17, a quiet illness that took her faster than anyone expected. At the funeral, his father cried the loudest, drew the most attention, told everyone how much he loved her. 2 years later he married again. Even louder. Even angrier. And somehow smaller. By then the lesson had already settled deep inside him. Power was not the fist that slammed the table. Power was the hand that could walk away and let the table stand empty. So when people later described him as passive, as easygoing, as a man who didn't assert himself enough, they were wrong in a way that mattered. He was not passive. He was disciplined. He observed the way others collected tells, the way gamblers studied cards. He learned how people behaved when they thought they were winning. That discipline shaped his adult life. In school he listened more than he spoke. In work he let others underestimate him. He noticed patterns, how arrogance always bloomed before collapse, how cruelty needed an audience to survive. Over time, restraint stopped feeling like sacrifice and started feeling like leverage. Which was why, lying there beside his wife, replaying her words from the rooftop, he didn't feel the urge to confront her. He didn't feel wounded in the way she would have expected. Instead he felt clarity. This wasn't a slip. It wasn't drunken exaggeration. It was consistency. She had simply said aloud what she had always believed, and believing something long enough turned it into behavior. He turned his head slightly and looked at her face in the dark. For a brief moment, he imagined waking her, asking her why, demanding an explanation. He imagined her laughter, her dismissal, the way she would flip the blame back onto him. He didn't do it. Instead, he closed his eyes and made a quiet decision, one rooted not in revenge but in confirmation. He would not act yet. He would watch. He would let her continue exactly as she was. Because if his mother had taught him anything, it was this. When someone believes you are powerless, they stop hiding who they are. And when they stop hiding, they give you everything you need. She liked to tell the story of how they met as if it were proof of destiny. Whenever someone asked, she smiled and said it had been unexpected, that she hadn't even been looking. She would tilt her head slightly, letting the light catch her cheekbones, and say he was different from the others, calmer, deeper, refreshing. People nodded when she said it because it sounded romantic and flattering, especially to a man who stood quietly beside her and never interrupted. The truth was less poetic, though no less deliberate. They had met at a networking event she almost hadn't attended, one of those polished gatherings filled with ambition disguised as charm. She was already on her way up then, her name beginning to circulate in rooms where opportunity lived. Men gravitated toward her openly, some with confidence, others with desperation. They talked too much, promised too much, tried too hard to impress. He hadn't. He stood near the edge of the room, holding a drink he barely touched, listening more than speaking. When she approached him, out of curiosity more than interest, he didn't immediately light up the way others did. He looked at her, smiled politely, and asked her a question that wasn't about what she did or who she knew. He asked what she enjoyed when no one was watching. It caught her off guard. That moment, small as it seemed, planted the first illusion. She interpreted his composure as humility, his lack of pursuit as insecurity. She believed she had found someone who wouldn't compete with her, wouldn't challenge her spotlight, wouldn't threaten her sense of control. A man she could shape around her life instead of rearranging her life around him. And he, for his part, noticed things she didn't realize she was revealing. He noticed how her smile changed depending on who was watching. How she softened her voice when she wanted something and sharpened it when she believed she had already won. He noticed how easily she spoke about loyalty as an abstract idea, something admirable in theory but inconvenient in practice. None of it repelled him. It intrigued him. Their relationship unfolded quickly in public and carefully in private. She liked that he listened. She liked that he didn't question her late nights or her sudden trips. When she canceled plans, he accepted it without protest. That acceptance felt like freedom to her, not realizing it was also a mirror. When he proposed, she told herself it made sense. He was stable, reliable, admiring. The kind of man who would support her rise without demanding a share of the stage. Her friends approved for reasons that sounded kind but weren't. He's good for you, they said. He won't hold you back. No one asked what she was good for him. On their wedding night, as they stood alone in the quiet after the guests had gone, she had laughed and said, "You know, you're lucky. Men like you don't usually get women like me." She meant it as a joke. He heard it as a confession. He kissed her forehead and said nothing, already filing the moment away with others like it. Small comments, casual hierarchies, truths disguised as humor. He didn't need to confront them yet. At that stage he wasn't collecting evidence. He was learning the terrain. Because even then, beneath the affection and the careful smiles, he understood something she didn't. Marriages didn't reveal character when things were hard. They revealed it when things were easy. And ease was where she would eventually forget to pretend. Don't forget to hit that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories. Tap the notification bell so you never miss a twist. New tales drop every day. Marriage, for her, became a stage where the spotlight never dimmed. At first, the shifts were subtle enough to be mistaken for personality quirks. She corrected him lightly in front of friends, finishing his sentences, rephrasing his opinions as if clarifying them for him. If he laughed it off, she laughed louder. If he stayed quiet, she spoke for both of them. People began to address questions to her even when they were meant for him, and she never redirected them. He noticed. He always noticed. At dinners, she would interrupt his stories midway, waving a dismissive hand and saying, "That's not how it happened," even when it was. At parties, she introduced him with affectionate diminutives that carried an edge. "He's so sweet. He's very simple. He keeps me grounded." Each phrase was received with smiles, because they sounded like praise if you didn't listen closely. He listened closely. At home, the dynamic sharpened. Decisions became announcements. Plans were made without consultation. If he questioned something gently, she rolled her eyes and said he was overthinking. If he pushed back even slightly, she accused him of being insecure. The words were never explosive. They were efficient, designed to end conversations quickly. He adapted, not by shrinking but by becoming more precise. The small notebook appeared during this period, though she didn't notice it at first. It lived in the inside pocket of his jacket, thin and unremarkable. At night, when she scrolled through her phone beside him, he would occasionally open it and write a line or two. No emotion. Just facts. Date. Setting. Exact words spoken. Who was present. How she reacted when challenged. How she reacted when she wasn't. He wasn't building a case against her. He was building a map. There were moments that almost broke the pattern. Times when she was kind, unexpectedly tender, vulnerable after a hard day. In those moments, he felt the familiar pull to excuse everything else, to believe this softness was the real her and the rest was performance. Each time he waited. Each time, the softness passed as soon as it was no longer needed. One evening at a small gathering, she laughed as someone teased him about being too calm, and said, "That's why I like him. He doesn't get ideas." The room laughed. He smiled politely. Later that night, alone in the bathroom, she caught him writing and asked what it was. "Notes," he said simply. "For work?" she asked, uninterested. "Yes," he replied, which was true in a way she couldn't yet understand. The more she asserted dominance, the more relaxed she became about it. Control, once normalized, stopped needing justification. She grew bolder, sharper. The mask thinned. And every time it did, she added another entry to the notebook without ever realizing she was authoring her own profile. What she saw was a man who never challenged her. What she didn't see was a man who was no longer deciding whether to stay, but how to leave without noise. Because somewhere beneath the routine, beneath the dinners and the dismissals, a quiet calculation was unfolding. He wasn't waiting for her to change. He was waiting for her to finish revealing herself. The sentence came back to him one afternoon in a way that felt almost physical, like a hand closing around his chest without warning. They were arguing, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough for the tension to feel routine. It was about something small, a dinner she had canceled without telling him until the last minute. He had asked carefully if next time she could let him know earlier. Not accused. Not demanded. Asked. She laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh at first. It was casual, careless, the kind of laugh people use when they believe the outcome is already decided. She leaned against the kitchen counter, crossed her arms, and tilted her head. "Relax," she said. "You're replaceable." The word landed between them and stayed there. For a second, even she seemed surprised she had said it out loud. Then she shrugged as if the truth didn't require apology. She reached for her phone, already disengaging, the argument over because she had declared it so. He didn't respond. He didn't argue. He didn't even look hurt. But something shifted. That night, long after she had gone to bed, he sat alone in the living room with the lights off, the city glowing faintly through the windows. He replayed the moment again and again, not with anger but with a strange sense of confirmation. The word replaceable echoed differently than her other jabs. This one wasn't about humor or status. It was about value. He opened the notebook and wrote the sentence down exactly as she had said it. Then, beneath it, he added something he hadn't written before: context. Tone, amused. Setting, private. No audience. That detail mattered. Because he understood something then that he hadn't fully accepted before. Public humiliation was a performance. This wasn't. This was how she spoke when she believed there would be no consequences. As he sat there, another memory surfaced. His mother at the window years ago, hands folded, eyes distant. He remembered asking her why she stayed so quiet. He remembered her answer, But this time he understood the part she hadn't said. Silence wasn't surrender. It was assessment. From that night on, he began paying attention to a different set of details. How often she dismissed him when no one else was around. How quickly she softened when she needed something. How little she noticed his emotional withdrawal because it didn't disrupt her comfort. She mistook his calm for dependence. She didn't realize calm could also be preparation. Weeks later, she would joke to a friend on the phone, pacing the bedroom, "Men are easy. You just have to decide how long you want to keep them." He heard it through the door. He wrote it down too. What she didn't know, what she couldn't imagine, was that the sentence about being replaceable hadn't wounded him. It had clarified him. Because a man who knows he is replaceable stops asking to be chosen. He starts deciding where he will no longer stay. And that decision, once made, doesn't announce itself. It waits. Don't forget to hit that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories. Tap the notification bell so you never miss a twist. New tales drop every day. The only person who ever questioned his silence was someone from a life she knew nothing about. They met on a quiet afternoon at a cafe far from the places she liked to be seen. The chairs were worn, the windows streaked with age, the kind of place that didn't care who you were as long as you paid and didn't rush. His friend arrived early, already seated, stirring coffee he hadn't touched. They had known each other long before ambition complicated things. Back when observation mattered more than appearance. Back when being underestimated was still a useful skill, not a survival one. "You look thinner," the friend said as he sat down. "Busy," he replied. They spoke about nothing at first, work in vague terms, mutual acquaintances, the weather. Then the friend leaned back, studying him more closely, the way people do when they know what questions not to ask. "She still thinks you don't notice," the friend said quietly. He didn't deny it. "Why are you letting it continue?" the friend asked. There was no judgment in his voice, just curiosity edged with concern. "You don't have to prove anything anymore." He wrapped his hands around his cup, letting the warmth seep in. "I'm not proving," he said. "I'm confirming." The friend frowned. "Confirming what?" "That she's consistent." That answer lingered between them. The friend sighed. "You know how this ends if you wait too long." "Yes," he said. "That's why I'm waiting." It wasn't arrogance that allowed him to speak so calmly. It was precision. He understood escalation better than most. He understood that confronting someone like her too early would only strengthen her narrative, paint him as insecure, emotional, ungrateful. He needed her to be exactly who she already was without interference. "I don't like watching you disappear," the friend said finally. "I'm not disappearing," he replied. "I'm stepping out of view." That was the difference she would never catch in time. As they stood to leave, the friend hesitated. "If you ever need me to step in." "I won't," he said gently. "This isn't something I win by force." When he returned home that evening, she barely looked up from her phone. She asked where he'd been, not out of interest but habit. When he said he'd met a friend, she smiled absently and said, "Must be nice to have time for that." He smiled back. That night, after she fell asleep, he added another note to the notebook, not about her words but about his own. He wrote the date and a single line beneath it. Decision deferred. Observation continues. What she never noticed was how his routines were subtly shifting. He started leaving earlier, returning later, his movements efficient and quiet. He stopped volunteering information. Stopped seeking validation. The less visible he became, the more she assumed control had deepened. She didn't understand that control, once taken for granted, becomes fragile. Because when someone stops reacting, they are no longer participating in the same game. And games only work when both players believe the rules still apply. The first time she felt unsettled, she couldn't explain why. It happened late one night, when the apartment was quiet in that hollow, expensive way that made every sound feel exposed. He had fallen asleep earlier than usual, his back turned toward her, breathing slow and even. She lay awake beside him, scrolling through her phone until boredom crept in, the kind that made her restless, the kind that made her curious. She reached for his jacket, draped over the chair. It wasn't suspicion that drove her. She wasn't looking for betrayal. She had never believed he was capable of one. That certainty was part of her comfort. She told herself she was just killing time, just confirming what she already knew. His wallet felt thinner than she expected. She opened it slowly, leafing through cards she recognized, ID, bank cards, things that told a story she thought she already understood. Ordinary. Predictable. Exactly as she'd always assumed. Then she saw it. A faded card tucked behind everything else. No logo. No company name. Just a name she didn't recognize and a phone number printed in clean, deliberate type. No address. No explanation. Her fingers paused. She felt it then, a faint tightening in her chest, an instinctive hesitation she didn't want to acknowledge. It wasn't fear. It was disruption. The card didn't belong to the version of him she carried in her mind. It didn't fit the narrative she had built so carefully. She turned the card over. Blank. For a moment, she considered waking him, asking casually, laughing it off as curiosity. But something stopped her. A sense, subtle but insistent, that asking would change something she wasn't ready to change yet. She slid the card back into place, returned the wallet to the jacket, and lay down beside him again. She told herself it was nothing. That everyone had old contacts, meaningless remnants of past lives. She told herself she was imagining tension where there was none. Still, sleep took longer than usual. In the days that followed, she found herself watching him more closely without realizing she was doing it. Not because she suspected him, but because she felt, for the first time, that there might be parts of him she hadn't catalogued. Small things stood out. The way he checked his phone and put it away without reacting. The way he listened during conversations, eyes distant, as if calculating something she couldn't see. Once she asked him what he'd been working on lately. Long-term projects, he said. She laughed lightly. You always say that. He smiled. Because it's always true. That answer lingered longer than it should have. At night, she began to notice how often he wasn't there when she woke briefly, standing by the window, sitting at the table, reading or writing quietly. He never mentioned it in the morning. Never looked tired. Never explained. The notebook appeared once in her peripheral vision, resting on the counter. She reached for it casually, but he took it before she could open it, not abruptly, not defensively, just smoothly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Careful, he said lightly. Work stuff. She rolled her eyes. You're so mysterious lately. He didn't deny it. What she didn't realize was that mystery unsettles people who are used to certainty. That unanswered questions gnaw at those who believe they already know the ending. And for the first time since their marriage began, she couldn't quite predict him. She told herself it didn't matter. But that night, as she drifted toward sleep, her mind returned to the faded card in his wallet, and to the uncomfortable thought she couldn't shake. What if she didn't know him at all? Don't forget to hit that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories. Tap the notification bell so you never miss a twist. New tales drop every day. The realization arrived quietly, but it rearranged everything she thought she understood. It came to her in fragments, small moments that refused to stay small. The way invitations stopped arriving in the same volume they used to. The way certain calls went unanswered a little longer than usual. The way meetings ended without the easy assurances she had come to expect. None of it was dramatic enough to be alarming on its own. Together, it formed a pattern she couldn't quite name. She blamed the market. Timing. People being busy. He watched all of it from a careful distance. By then, his preparation had moved beyond observation. The notebook was no longer just documentation. It had become a framework. Each entry connected to another, behaviors forming profiles, patterns aligning with outcomes he had seen many times before. He wasn't improvising. He was applying a system he had learned long ago, refined over years in rooms where power never raised its voice. Late one evening, while she talked animatedly on the phone about an upcoming opportunity, he sat at the dining table, listening without appearing to. She mentioned names, companies, intentions. He wrote none of it down. He didn't need to anymore. What she didn't realize was that her access to certain rooms, certain reputations, certain protections, had never been as independent as she believed. It had rested on perception, on credibility, on people quietly vouching for her character when she wasn't there to do it herself. And he had been one of those people. Not loudly, not explicitly, just enough. The next morning, she woke to an email that unsettled her. A partnership delayed. No explanation. Later that afternoon, another message, polite, vague, non-committal. She frowned, reread them, and felt irritation bloom. She told herself it was temporary. That things like this happened. When she mentioned it to him in passing, expecting sympathy, he looked up from his coffee and said, "Sometimes momentum changes." The way he said it, neutral, almost reflective, made her pause. "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked. He shrugged lightly. "Nothing. Just an observation." That was the problem. He was observing again. Over the next few days, the discomfort sharpened. A dinner invitation rescinded. A mutual contact suddenly distant. She began to feel something she wasn't accustomed to feeling. Uncertainty without a clear target. There was no one to confront, no argument to win, no obvious enemy to blame. At night, she lay awake longer than usual, listening to the rhythm of his breathing, wondering when it had started feeling like he was somewhere else even when he was beside her. She asked him once, half joking, "You're not planning anything behind my back, are you?" He looked at her for a moment before answering. "No," he said. "I'm just letting things be what they are." The answer was calm, honest, and deeply unsettling. Because for the first time the power dynamic she relied on felt absent. Not reversed. Not challenged. Just removed. As if the game she had been playing no longer had an audience. She didn't know it yet, but this was the most dangerous stage. The moment when someone realizes control is slipping but doesn't yet understand why. And by the time understanding arrives, it's usually too late. The night it unraveled, it did so in public. Exactly where she had always felt safest. The venue was larger than usual, brighter, filled with people who knew her name and expected her to command the room. She arrived late, deliberately, arm looped through his as if reminding everyone that she chose when to appear. The attention pleased her. It always had. He moved beside her with his usual composure, neither clinging nor distant. If anything, he seemed lighter, as though something heavy had already been set down. As the evening progressed, wine loosened her restraint. Compliments came easily and she accepted them without deflection. When someone joked about how calm her husband was, how he never seemed bothered by anything, she laughed. "That's because he knows his place," she said, smiling sweetly. "Right where I need him." The laughter that followed was louder this time, edged with discomfort. A few glances shifted toward him, searching for a reaction. They found none. He didn't smile. He didn't frown either. He simply looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in a way she couldn't interpret. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was something colder and clearer, like the moment just before a decision is finalized. She noticed it, felt a flicker of irritation. To reassert herself, she lifted her glass and added, almost playfully, "I mean, if I ever get bored, I can always walk away. He knows that." Silence followed, brief but noticeable. He set his glass down. "Okay," he said. "Just that." No explanation. No argument. No raised voice. Just a single word that seemed to pull the air out of the room. People shifted. Someone coughed. The music felt suddenly too loud. She laughed it off quickly, but something had cracked. The balance she relied on, her performance, his compliance, had slipped just slightly out of alignment. She watched him for the rest of the night, trying to catch another reaction, another cue. He gave her nothing. They left separately for the first time in their marriage, both claiming convenience. In the car ride home, she replayed the moment again and again, the way his "okay" had sounded less like agreement and more like closure. She slept poorly. The next morning her phone buzzed earlier than usual. Messages stacked up, short, professional, unsettlingly vague. A deal on hold. A meeting postponed indefinitely. A polite apology where assurance used to be. She called a contact she trusted. No answer. By noon the pattern was impossible to ignore. Something had shifted overnight. Not exploded. Shifted. Quietly. She confronted him that evening, pacing the living room while he sat calmly on the couch, listening. "What's going on?" she demanded. "People are pulling away. Things are falling through." He nodded slowly. "That happens." Her frustration sharpened. "Why are you acting like this doesn't concern you?" He looked at her then, his expression unreadable. "Because it doesn't surprise me." The words landed harder than she expected. For the first time she felt fear, not of loss but of realization. A creeping sense that the version of him she thought she knew had never been the whole man. And that whatever she had taken for granted, whatever protections she believed were permanent, might have been far more fragile than she ever imagined. Don't forget to hit that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories. Tap the notification bell so you never miss a twist. New tales drop every day. She didn't sleep at all that night. By morning, irritation had hardened into panic. Her phone lay heavy in her hand as she scrolled through messages that had gone unanswered and emails that carried a tone she didn't recognize, polite, distant, final. The warmth people once reserved for her had cooled into something procedural. She dressed quickly, mind racing, rehearsing explanations she wasn't yet sure she needed. He moved through the apartment with unhurried efficiency, collecting documents from a drawer she had never opened, placing them neatly into a slim folder. He dressed as if for an ordinary day, calm and precise, the kind of calm that felt intentional now. "You're not going to tell me what's happening?" she asked, unable to keep the edge from her voice. He paused, considering her, not with irritation but with something like respect, an acknowledgement that the moment had arrived. I already did, he said. Just not in the way you expected. That was when she noticed what he was holding. The notebook. Not tucked away. Not hidden. Open in his hands. She stepped closer despite herself. What is that? A record, he said simply. He turned a page and read aloud, not dramatically, not accusatory. Just factual entries. Dates. Places. Exact quotes. Her words, preserved without embellishment. She heard herself say things she barely remembered saying, stripped of humor, stripped of context, standing alone. Why would you write these down? She whispered. Because patterns matter, he replied. And consistency reveals intent. Her breath came faster. You're acting like I'm some kind of project. No, he said gently. You made yourself one. She demanded answers then, about the faded card, about the call she'd overheard late at night, about the way people were suddenly treating her as if something unspoken had changed. For the first time her voice cracked. He listened until she finished. Then he explained, not everything, not all at once, but enough. He told her about the work he had done long before they met. About advising organizations on internal collapse, on how toxic leadership erodes trust long before it becomes visible. About how credibility isn't lost in scandals but in whispers. About how influence often exists in the quiet decisions people make when they think no one important is watching. You didn't lose anything overnight, he said. You just stopped being buffered. The word stung. Buffered by you? Yes. She stared at him, realization dawning too late. You did this to me. He shook his head. No. I stopped doing it for you. The difference mattered more than she wanted to admit. When she accused him of revenge, his expression softened. Not with guilt, but with something closer to sadness. If I wanted revenge, he said, you'd know. This isn't punishment. It's alignment. He closed the notebook and placed it on the table between them. I married you to understand something about myself, he continued. I needed to know whether I could stay kind without losing myself. I have my answer now. She reached for him then, not physically but emotionally, trying to reclaim the dynamic she had relied on for so long. We can fix this, she said quickly. I can change. He believed she meant it. That was the tragedy of it. Change isn't something you promise when the cost arrives, he said quietly. It's what you do before you think there will be one. He picked up the folder, slipped on his coat and walked toward the door. She followed, panic breaking through control. Where are you going? She demanded. He opened the door and looked back at her one last time. Somewhere I'm not replaceable. The door closed softly behind him, the sound final in a way no argument ever could be. The fallout didn't announce itself with drama. It arrived the way winter does, quietly then all at once. In the days after he left, she moved through her life with the same outward confidence, but it no longer worked the way it used to. Rooms didn't warm when she entered them. Conversations stalled instead of bending toward her. People listened politely, nodded, then moved on. She told herself it was temporary, that perception always lagged behind truth. She just needed to correct the narrative. But narratives require believers. She tried to trace the collapse back to a single moment, a single action she could confront or undo. There was nothing. No leaked messages. No exposed scandal. No dramatic betrayal she could point to and say this is where it went wrong. Every door that closed did so gently, with apologies and explanations that sounded reasonable enough to argue against, and impossible to overturn. One afternoon she finally reached someone she trusted. An older woman who had once mentored her, who had spoken for her in rooms she wasn't allowed into yet. I don't understand what's happening, she said, forcing lightness into her voice. It feels like people have decided something about me without telling me. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then a sigh. People didn't decide, the woman said carefully. They noticed. Noticed what? She asked sharply. How you treat people when you think they don't matter, the woman replied. How you speak when you believe the room belongs to you. Her chest tightened. Who told you that? No one had to, the woman said. These things travel quietly. They always do. After the call ended, she sat alone, the words echoing in her mind. She thought of the notebook. The dates. The exact quotes. For the first time she understood what it really was. Not ammunition, not manipulation, but a mirror she had never bothered to look into. Across the city, he settled into a life that felt unfamiliar in its lightness. Not happier in the way movies promised, but steadier. He rented a modest place near the water, mornings quiet, evenings his own. He took calls when he chose to. He declined more than he accepted. The work continued but differently now. More selective. More honest. Once, his friend from the cafe asked him if he felt vindicated. No, he said after a moment. Relieved. Do you miss her? He thought about it carefully. I miss who I thought she could be, he said. But that person only existed when it cost her nothing. Weeks later she saw him again by chance, or so it felt to her. He was seated at an outdoor cafe reading, looking exactly as he always had. Calm. Unremarkable. Untouchable in a way she had never recognized before. She stood there for a long moment, debating whether to approach. Pride warred with desperation. Finally she walked over. He looked up and met her eyes without surprise. I didn't think I'd see you, she said. You didn't think much about me at all, he replied gently. She swallowed. I was wrong. I know, he said. There was no bitterness in his voice. That was the hardest part. As she walked away, the weight of that realization settled fully for the first time. The man she had called replaceable had removed himself without noise, without spectacle, and without ever trying to destroy her. He had simply stopped holding her world together. And sometimes she realized too late, that was the most unexpected revenge of all. Don't forget to hit that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories. Tap the notification bell so you never miss a twist. New tales drop every day. Time did what confrontation never could. It stripped away the excuses. Months passed. The city changed seasons, but her world stayed stalled in a quiet, humiliating suspension. She still had resources, still had a name people recognized, but recognition without respect felt hollow. Invitations came with conditions now. Praise came carefully, never freely. She learned how it felt to be tolerated instead of sought after. In the privacy of her apartment, she replayed memories she had once dismissed as insignificant. His silence at parties. His lack of defensiveness. The way he had listened when others spoke, absorbing rather than reacting. She finally understood what she had mistaken for weakness was restraint. Chosen, not forced. One evening, driven by a need she could no longer outrun, she opened her laptop and searched for his name. Not socially. Professionally. What she found unsettled her more than any confrontation could have. Articles without bylines referencing strategic advisory roles. Case studies written anonymously, describing organizations stabilized, or quietly dismantled, through behavioral mapping and influence withdrawal. The language was clinical. Precise. Familiar in a way that made her stomach turn. She saw herself between the lines. For the first time, shame arrived without defensiveness. Not the kind that demanded sympathy, but the kind that forced recognition. She hadn't been outplayed in a game she didn't understand. She had been fully understood in a game she didn't know she was playing. Across the city, his life continued to expand in quieter ways. He built routines that didn't require validation. He invested in conversations that didn't center on performance. When people asked about his marriage, he answered without bitterness. It ended, he said. And that was necessary. One afternoon he found the voicemail he had deleted months earlier backed up in an old archive. He listened to it once. His own voice, calm, offering patience where it was no longer deserved. He didn't regret deleting it. He deleted it again. Some things were meant to remain unsaid. Their final encounter happened without drama, without closure speeches or apologies. They crossed paths briefly at a conference neither expected the other to attend. She looked older, not in years but in awareness. He looked unchanged, which unsettled her more than anything else. She hesitated, then spoke. You were never my play toy. He considered that. No, he said. I was my own man. I just hadn't stopped being yours yet. There was no anger in his tone. Just truth. They parted without promises, without bitterness, without the illusion that anything needed to be fixed. Some lessons don't ask for reconciliation. They ask for acknowledgement. As he walked away, the meaning of revenge finally clarified, not as destruction, not as humiliation, but as withdrawal. The quiet reclaiming of self from someone who never valued it. And she stood there, surrounded by people, realizing too late that boredom had never been the danger. Contempt had been.